Good afternoon, everybody. Now, believe it or not, I'm sure just about 80 to 90% of you have come across somebody who suffers from drug addiction. Whether it comes from the environment that you live in, or if you see it on TV, or even at any time it has affected your loved ones directly. See, regardless, you have somehow managed to bring it into your life. But the question is, how did you respond to it? See, I believe it is the response of the people that affects the outcome for drug addicts. Indeed, drug addiction isn't the problem, for all it really is a cry for acceptance. Today's society, we are made to believe that drug addiction comes from the continuous use of drugs. Now, don't get me wrong, this may seem the case, but when you or someone you know receives prescribed medications, you wouldn't just all of a sudden become an addict. In a way, we look at these meds because we become a little dependent on them in order to make life just seem a tad bit easier. Now, the same goes for drug addicts, except these people are made to believe, or I should say we treat them as if throwing them in jail cells, rehabs, therapies, making them feel in some way secluded from the normal society is supposed to help them because they made bad choices. But really, if you think about it, what we're really doing is isolating them from the community. We're making them feel as if they are strangers. And this keeps them from maintaining that healthy, intactful relationship and connection we have with the normal society to feel the same as the regular people. So what drug addicts do is, in order to feel this relief or self-importance, they become a tad bit more dependent on these drugs or narcotics. And in that way, that's a scream to society that they just want to feel how we do, normal. Now, drug addicts, like any other human, can contribute to society. Now, don't get me wrong, sometimes throwing them in places we feel like rehabilitation centers will help them. But if we want to make a big, crucial difference to society, we need to do something else. We need to change our way of handling our situations as a human being, as a nation. Now, next thing I want to talk about is this social experiment. It was conducted by a well-practiced psychologist named Bruce Alexander. And in the TED Talk video, they talked about how he experimented using rats. Now, one of the rats, he pretty much isolated it. He isolated this rat by putting him into this cage with nothing but 2 bottles of water. One of the water bottles had nothing but water. The other one had water, but was somewhat spiked with heroin. And what he's noticed over the time was that the rat had become very dependent on the heroin-induced water, and eventually that led to a fatal overdose. After that experiment, he conducted another one, except with this rat, he let it become socially involved. He gave it food, he gave it companions, he gave it things to play with. And what that did was that enabled the rat to become part of a society, a community. And so none of the rats actually liked the H2O that was spiked with heroin. They actually completely ignored it afterwards. So what I'm saying is, I know rats aren't human beings, but socially we are not as different as you think. Now, during the Vietnam War, the soldiers were deployed just, to help, with the war that we came across. And in order for those soldiers to cope, they had to find a way to make it seem easier to deal with the stress and the hardships of which the war brought upon them. And so, believe it or not, they used loads and loads of heroin. This is what was supposed to help them cope. And what it did really was it kept them bonded to something. As human beings, we like to bond to stuff to make ourselves feel like we are part of something. Individually, it is hard to fit, but as a group, we are strong. Now, when they got back, instantly they were all able to just get off of the heroin. There was no rehabilitation needed. There was no therapies needed. As long as they had their healthy relationships, they were able to completely just drop it because they didn't need it, because they had their connections, they had their loved ones, they had their community. See, as human beings, we're made to interact and bond to society, but by cutting off those things that give us comfort and relief, we find things that we will draw comfort from, whether it's from a bottle or from illegal narcotics. Now, to escape the isolation, the reality of isolation, we're no longer going to be able to fit into our legal economy. You have to understand the struggles that these people suffer from, especially with their loved ones, the ones who are put to the side and treated like they're no longer anybody who's important as the rest of us. Now, the less connected we feel, the harder it is to maintain relationships, and we become more and more dependent on things that feel somewhat bonded to, negative or positive. But alas, we are distancing ourselves, and that all people, instead of belittling them, we should treat them like a part of us, like they're a part of a group, like they're part of something that will make a big difference, that they are meant for this. They have their purpose. And we should use the drug addiction to help us contribute to society, make them feel welcome. For example, open small businesses, using their skills and potentials to create new big ideas. Give back to the community. People need to feel connected. We should all do our part and accept that. Because when we do that, we'll start rising instead of falling. And things will get better. And believe it or not, the more we do of something to change, the more we accept people, and the less we hurt each other, the easier it will become for our community to get better positively instead of negative.